President Kikwete has also served as Deputy Minister for Energy and Minerals, as well as the Minister for Ministry of Water, Energy, and Materials. In 1994, at the age of 44, he became one of the youngest finance ministers in the history of Tanzania. While at the Treasury, he worked to establish discipline in public finance management and accountability, and is still remembered today for establishing a cash budget system. In December 1995, President Kikwete became Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. During his tenure as minister, he played a significant role in bringing peace in the Great Lakes region, particularly in Burundi and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He was also deeply involved in the process of regional integration in East Africa, working to establish a customs union between Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. He held this position for 10 years before being elected to president in 2005. We have focused on Tanzania. Africa Society did a travelogue on Tanzania, which was widely received and viewed in America. The Sullivan Summit was held this past year, once again, highlighting the importance of Tanzania, and also, I believe, MCA, a contract was awarded to the country, which shows that it is ruling justly and investing in its people. It's my honor to present to you His Excellency, President Kikwete. Thank you.
Well, I thank you. Well, sorry for my voice. You know, I've caught a cold yesterday. I don't know what happened. Well, thank you, Congressman Donald Payne. It has always been a great pleasure for me to interact with members of the Congressional Black Caucus. This is the feeling of all my colleagues in Africa, because we consider you to be Africa's natural constituency in the United States of America and in the U.S. Congress in particular. I thank you, my brother, Chairman of the House Committee on Africa and Global Health, as host of the Brain Trust session, for the invitation today. The invitation once again affords me the opportunity to rub shoulders with you in this August assembly here. But I also thank you so much for asking me to share my thoughts about U.S.-Africa relations with the coming administration. I'm glad this event is taking place now, when in less than 6 weeks, the people of this country will elect a new president in an election which we consider to be historic. It is the first time in U.S. history that someone of African origin has ever reached so far in a presidential race. You have demonstrated how real the American dream is. I would like you to know that the people of Tanzania and Africa are following with keen interest the U.S. elections. We do so not because Senator Barack Obama is a candidate, but primarily because the U.S. is a preeminent global power. So whomever you choose to install in the White House on January 20th, 2009 will affect the lives of almost everybody on this planet and every nation. We in Africa Tanzania included, would always wish to have good relations with the government and the people of the United States of America. I strongly believe it is in the interests of both the United States of America and it is in the interest of Africa. It benefits us both. Africa considers her relations with the U.S. to be very strategic. Africa is the poorest continent. It is home to 34 of the 50 poorest countries in the world. African governments and people are confronted with daunting development challenges of lifting themselves up from poverty and underdevelopment trap. Being poor and economically weak makes one vulnerable politically as well. The United States of America is the biggest political and economic power in the world, not to mention the military power. It is not relevant today. Africa sees a lot of benefits in forging good relations with the U.S. This will enable African nations get the much-needed development assistance, as well as investments, markets for its goods, and technology from the United States, which are critical for Africa's development. But also Africa needs the political support of this global powerhouse in the international arena to advance Africa's interests. U.S. voice in support of Africa or an African nation or African nations makes a huge difference. If the U.S. says you are a bad man, you'll face a lot of problems. And if they say you are a good man, you'll get a lot of benefits. However, I can say from the economic standpoint that I think I'm not competent enough to preach the better knowledge to the better knowledgeable and better experienced U.S. entrepreneurs. However, I can state with confidence that there are tremendous benefits for U.S. businesses as well as businessmen and women from the U.S. to have good relations with Africa. It will afford them access to 53 countries for their investment, for markets, for their goods, but also for businesses. With regards to development assistance, it is first and foremost an historic duty and a moral obligation for those who are better off to help the needy. This is very much in keeping with the teachings of the Holy Scriptures of all religions. It is God's wish and direction to His creation. Deuteronomy 15, verse 7. If there is a poor man among you, one of your brothers, in any of the towns of the land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand to your poor brother, but you shall freely open your hand to him and generously lend him sufficient for his need in whatever he lacks. There is this small obligation of the U.S. being a major economic power to help the poor and the needy. Assisting African nations in their development endeavors, therefore, is an obligation which emanates from the decisions of international fora, which the U.S. is a prominent member. Among them, to mention about a few, are the United Nations, particularly the landmark decisions of the 2000 Millennium Summit which came up with the MDGs and the Monterrey Summit on financing for development. There is also the G8, where the US is the lead member. Many decisions and commitments have been made at the G8 summits to assist the development of African nations. If the commitments are made at these three fora, if the commitments made at these three fora are met by the developed countries, Africa's development would have reached a different plane by now. So much has been promised. So much has been committed. If the commitments were met, Africa would have been at a different plane. Unfortunately, this is not the case, and the US is not the exception in this regard. It is Africa's wish and expectation that the US will meet its part of the bargain. Speaking about this matter at this particular point in time, where the US economy is faced with unprecedented financial crisis, may look awkward, or some may even see me as being insensitive or unreasonable. I'm neither. I'm a firm believer that this crisis will come to pass. Not everything has been lost in the United States of America. The US is still the economic power we all know, and it will remain so. The United States of America can meet its international obligations, particularly the historic mission and moral obligation of assisting the poor and the needy in Africa. There is no basis for cutting down on aid to Africa. I would humbly appeal to you all to resist the temptation of being over-protectionist because of this problem, and cut aid to the poor and the needy on the African continent. That would be a very unfortunate extremist position and a dangerous one indeed. It won't be different from the view being advanced by some that because of the current financial crisis, free enterprise has failed. It is not the appropriate economic model to follow. So you'll all be in the same boat. U.S. development assistance to African nations to enhance their capacities for socio-economic growth serves the best interest of the United States of America. A better off Africa is of great benefit to all nations on this planet. Africa looks forward to continued support and increased assistance. So far, we appreciate highly the support we've been getting from the United States, from the US government, and the people of the United States of America through philanthropies, NGOs, faith-based organizations, the civil society as well. It has been of great benefit to us on the continent. The support Africa has been getting from this country, combined with support from other friends elsewhere and blended with our own efforts, is what has made the Africa we see today. And the pastures in Africa are dry. They will always attempt to go there. You read in the papers, in the TV, every day they brought people from Gambia, Mauritania. They don't stop, despite the stringent law. So I'm saying a developed Africa serves the best interests of the United States. A poor Africa does not serve the interests of the United States of America. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Africa has made significant strides in the social, economic, and political landscape compared to the downturns of the past. Africa is no longer the hopeless case as perceived by some quarters. There has been considerable improvements over the past few years and continue to happen with each passing year. So many good things are happening on the African continent these days. There is increasing political stability. Peace reigns in most nations, except a few. And we are constantly witnessing economies of many African nations getting strong by the day. Africa is now a continent in full embrace of democracy, good governance, rule of law, and respect for human rights. There is stronger commitment to deal with vices in society, including the scourge of corruption and many others. In these endeavors to deal with these vices in society, unlike in the past, where it was the exclusive right of virtuous leaders and their watchdog institutions, today all citizens have joined through their civil society organizations, through the media, their parliaments, and others in this fight. Signs of success are emerging, and I believe in the next few years, Africa will be a great place. Most African countries have embraced democratic governance, and regular periodic elections have become the norm. In the past 2 years, a good number of African countries have successfully held elections. It is common practice these days for domestic and external observers to monitor elections. It is heartwarming indeed that the reports are increasingly becoming positive, which is a sign that democratic governance is taking roots in Africa. It is a matter of principle enshrined in the Constitutive Act of the African Union that leaders who come into office through an undemocratic means will be suspended from participating in the activities of the African Union. Indeed, Africa has come of age. The old principle of non-interference in the internal affairs has surely been replaced by the non-indifference to violations of democracy and abuse of human rights. Mr. Chairman, there are fewer conflicts or conflict situations in the continent today than it was the case a few years ago. This is testimony to the fact that democracy, good governance are taking root, and the African peace and security architecture is working. Today in Africa, besides Darfur, Somalia, and probably the eastern part of Democratic Republic of the Congo, there isn't a serious conflict to talk about. That's why I'm saying Africa has come of age, and good things are happening on the continent. So I'm saying the African peace and security architecture is working. Democracy and good governance are taking root. Because where there is democracy deficit, where there is a governance deficit, is a recipe for crisis. And where the architecture, the peace and security architecture is not strong enough, the conflicts continue for quite a long time. It is comforting indeed to know that Africans, through the African Union and their regional economic organizations, have been proactive and have taken the lead in monitoring elections and resolving conflicts where they arose. Many African nations are now willing to participate in peace building and peacekeeping efforts, as has been the case with Darfur, where before the current arrangement of the UN also participating, it is African countries that volunteer to send troops there. Rwanda, Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and a number of others. And we were saying, these days to participate in peacekeeping operations under the UN, you have to have APCs, you have to have machines to clean the water. There are so many things. But we are saying, We have deployed it in Darfur. There was nobody went with the APCs there. There was no water cleaning machine. So these days, to deploy, they have got to make sure that you have everything. And the people are dying. And so you have to have an APC. Okay, and the APC has got to be wieldy APC. If you have the chained APC, you cannot deploy. The people are dying. You have to place an order for manufacture of wheeled APCs. The company says it will take us 10 months to deliver. And the UN says, okay, fine, we wait. So, at times you see how we operate. But our people volunteered. We kept the peace in Burundi after this civil war. Ethiopia deployed, Mozambique deployed, South Africa deployed. On an emergency basis, because we had concluded the negotiations on Burundi. The government was going to come into office on the 1st of November, and the internal arrangements for protection had not yet materialized. What do? Do we leave the agreement to crumble? Say, no, we can't leave the agreement to crumble. We are going to volunteer. So the countries volunteered, and there is Burundi today. So I'm saying there is a lot of good things happening on the ground. However, much more needs to be done to strengthen Africa's union, capacity for early warning, capacity for conflict prevention, and capacity for conflict resolution, as well as capacity for peace building, for reconstruction and peace building, post-conflict reconstruction and peace building. There is also need to do the same with the regional economic groupings to buttress their peace building efforts. Africa needs to be supported and assisted in these endeavors. We appreciate the unqualified support of the U.S. government in this regard. We would like to see this support continued and expanded in the next administration. I said earlier on that Africa is no longer the hopeless case, nor is Africa the basket case. In the majority of African countries, economies are getting stronger, and there is every indication of their being on the right trajectory to sustainable growth. Most of them, for example, for 4 years, most African countries in the last 4 years have attained impressive economic growth. In 2007, Africa achieved 4.8% growth, up from 5.7% in 2006, up from 5.2% in 2005. Growth in Africa is widely shared, this is the other factor, across the sectors and across the regions. With the exception of North Africa, where growth performance slightly decelerated from 6.1 to 5.9, all other regions experienced higher growth in 2007 compared to 2006. African exports also progressed further in 2006 to reach 360.9 billion, up by 21% from 2005. This was the fourth year in a row that Africa's exports grew by more than 20% each year. These remarkable successes are very much a function of the pursuit of sound economic policies which promote macroeconomic stability. Policies which encourage the growth and role of the private sector, increase investments, increase foreign capital flows, policies which promote increased exports. But these achievements are under serious threat from increased food and fuel crisis, which has been the major causal factor of high inflationary pressures in all nations on the African continent. As a matter of fact, if the food and oil crisis are not contained, or rather let's say if this crisis is not reversed, first let's stem its rise and then reverse the trend, there is danger for many African economies losing out on the humble gains made on the macroeconomic stability, but also in the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals. Africa needs to be assisted. Support of the US government, the next administration, will highly be appreciated. But African countries and economies continue to face other formidable development challenges in their endeavors to reduce poverty, on which we will need US continued support. Africa needs to be assisted to overcome the many constraints which impede the attainment of higher social and economic growth in the continent. Among these constraints include the infrastructure development, roads, railways, ports, power, water supply, airports, telecommunications. When you look at the human development indicators, when we look at Africa's situation with regards to infrastructure on roads, railways, ports, power, Africa is worse off. It also involves education and healthcare. These are critical for growth. There is no development without education. There is no growth if the people continue to be sick. So I'm saying infrastructure, education, health are critical for accelerating growth in Africa, promoting and accelerating growth in Africa. But all these require huge sums of money, which African governments cannot meet all that is required. I'm not saying that African governments are doing nothing and therefore they are simply waiting for philanthropy or for benevolence. No. We're trying our best. Take for our case, for example, 17% of our budget is allocated for education, 13% for infrastructure, 11% for health. We are doing so much. But it is so big in terms of a small budget. The budget of Tanzania is $7 billion. The other time, in 2006, I was invited for a business lunch at NASDAQ. And the CEO there was saying, well, we are the technology market. Our business is $7 trillion. We are grappling with a $7 billion budget to meet our demands, our huge challenges. At the same time, in the evening, I had lunch, which my brother Andy Young organized with a few brothers and sisters. One sister we were engaged in a conversation, and she was complaining that She's just have a small business with a turnover of $3 billion. So you can imagine, this one is complaining, the business is small, with a turnover of 3 billion. I'm in charge of a nation of 40 million people. Our budget is only $7 billion. So we are trying our best, but there is limited resources. There is limit to what we can do on our own. That's why we are saying Africa needs to be assisted. Africa, therefore, needs to be assisted. Let me mention here now how appreciative we are to the U.S. government and to the people in the United States for the invaluable support you've been lending to Africa in this regard. Over the many years, development assistance has been extended to Africa. In this administration, so much has been done. So many initiatives have been put in place which have benefited so much Africa. There's the MCC. Tanzania is one of the large beneficiaries of this with 700 million. We're going to deal with the infrastructure, the roads, the electricity, and water supply. There is President's Malaria Initiative, which is saving so many lives out there. In Zanzibar, we almost reach a point where malaria has been eliminated. Through residual spraying, treated mosquito nets, and availability of ACTs. There is PEPFAR, which is helping us in the fight against AIDS, HIV and AIDS. Before PEPFAR, only 50,000 people were receiving ARVs. Now there are 1.7 million in Africa receiving ARVs. And we thank you, Congressman Payne, and everybody in Congress for the support that you rendered to PEPFAR. The government requested 15 billion. You gave them 48 billion. You kept, I'm told you gave them 50 billion, but you kept 2 billion for yourselves. But that's fine. If with less, so many lives have been saved, how many more will be saved with 48 billion? There is the education initiative, helping us with printing textbooks, teacher training. There are so many initiatives which I'm saying have benefited Africa tremendously. They continue at increased levels. Because if they continue the current levels, it is just sustenance. But they've got to continue beyond the current levels. That gives greater hope to Africa. There is also need to unlock constraints to the productive sectors in Africa. Help create jobs and increase people's incomes. The infrastructure, education, and health is about the social and economic services, which are critical. But at the end of the day, someone's life will be transformed if he earns an income. It is a question of productive sectors or the service sectors. It's a question of creating jobs so that they can earn something. top priority should be given to agriculture, promoting agriculture, development of agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, and other service sectors, through the participation of the private sector. There is need to assist African countries in the development of the private sectors locally, so that they can undertake this task with credit, skills, technology, but also there is need to create markets for them. This is an area where a lot more needs to be done again. With regards to markets, AGOA is a facility which creates market access. I know Schneiderman worked on this one. I remember he and I worked closely on AGOA. It needs to be continued. It opens up this huge consumer market, the largest consumer market in the world for African produce. Doing otherwise is not in the interest of Africa. Neither is it in the interest of the United States of America. With regards to agriculture, much more needs to be done to assist African governments and Africans in the modernization of agriculture. Productivity is very low. We need to enhance productivity. We need to invest in irrigation, availability of high-yielding seeds, the availability of fertilizers, insecticides and pesticides, rural roads to open up the countryside so that goods produced will reach the markets. We need more investments from the U.S. in manufacturing, in agriculture, in tourism, and in the service sectors. The conditions, the investment climate in Africa is attractive, is favorable. All that is expected of an investment destination have been done. The fiscal incentives, there is political stability, there is security, and so on. The only thing is we don't see much in terms of investments. The efforts that we put in pitching for Africa is not commensurate to the results of investments flowing from the U.S. into Africa. My conclusion has been, it takes the voice of the leaders of this country to encourage their people to invest in Africa. This is our expectation of the next administration. If you don't take it, I can make a lecture. A few minutes to come, I'm going to talk at the council, the Corporate Council on Africa. I've spoken there a few days, several times before. I'm not sure there's going to be something new that I'm going to tell you. So the same thing. Come, the investment climate is good. We welcome everybody to come. We have said it. I'm going to repeat that. But to get to the extra mile, my strong conviction is that it takes the leaders of this country to encourage their private sectors to look at Africa favorably. They will come. The assurance that go there is fine, I'm sure it will definitely pay dividends. But we also, I don't want to take much of your time because there's so much to talk about, but let me mention two things. The U.S., we look forward to U.S. leadership on some of these global issues. And I want to talk about the global issues that are related to Africa's development. that are related to unlocking Africa's constraints to development. Climate change, the Doha round of negotiations. Well, with regards to climate change, there is no need of me explaining what it is all about. But certainly, the environment of this common planet we all live in is very much in danger. The planet is in danger. We need to do something about averting that danger, mitigating the effects of climate change, reversing the trends now, reduce global warming. The effects are real. For us in Africa, if it is not El Nino, it is La Nina. It's just interchanging. 1 year you have floods, 2 years you have drought. That goes for 4 years. In floods you lose out, in drought you lose out. Then Africa becomes a perpetual food deficit region, depending on food aid. But there are so many other effects. Sea levels are rising. We have one island in Tanzania which has completely disappeared. It used to be the place where the green turtles hatch, lay eggs. Now they have moved from that island. They have occupied the best beach on the coastline. I had to use my powers to stop people from constructing hotels there. I said, you can't construct hotels. This is the hatchery of the green turtle. They travel all over the place to come and lay eggs, and then they simply disappear. Unfortunately, they have taken the best part of the beach. Because the northern part, there is a river coming in, so there is a lot of silt. The southern part, there is another river coming in, there is a lot of silt. This is the best part of the beach. And this, fortunately also, this is a unique place for us. We have the Serengeti National Park. It's the only place, there are 2 places in the world where you have wildlife and beach. Tanzania is one of them, and this is one of the places. We have created a national park there, but its utilization in terms of creating hotels has become difficult because these goats creatures have occupied that, have taken over that one. They come there, lay eggs, and disappear. They come back every March. If in March you go there, visit the place, it's a fascinating sight. Some cruel guys go and kill them. When the turtles when they lay eggs, they're in a state of trance. So they come with those spears, they kill them. One time I was very angry with one man. He killed an 80-kilo turtle. You can imagine. So these are some of those effects of climate change. And this world looks to U.S. leadership in facing the climate change issue. This administration has tried in these last days of the administration, but we expect the next administration to be more proactive on issues related to climate change. The last thing I want to talk about is the Doha round of negotiations. Africa needs markets. Africa needs a place, needs space to trade. The current financial and trading architecture weighs against Africa. There are so many barriers to it. We need to remove those barriers. And Doha negotiations is the way forward. They are stalled. We hope the next administration will be proactive in ensuring that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you a picture of Africa. That has been built through the efforts, our own efforts, and through the generous efforts of our development partners, the United States of America being one of them. Continued and increased support for Africa will take Africa to greater heights of development. The heights which we all of us want to see Africa attain. The heights which all of us would be proud of. The heights which each one of us will take pride for what he or she has contributed to making Africa attain those heights. There is no doubt that President George W. Bush during his term elevated our U.S. support to African development challenges to unprecedented levels. We cannot expect anything less from the successive administrations. But we can ask for and expect even greater U.S. engagement in supporting these efforts across the continent to address the challenges of peace, security, stability, the challenges of development, health, education, the infrastructure, assist in consolidating governance, the institutions of governance, challenges of realizing African potential for growth and development. A proverb from Madagascar, the biggest island on the African continent, says, people are like plants in the wind. They bow down and rise up again. For too long, Africa has been bowed down. It is now time for Africa to rise. In the process of rising, we would like to count on the support of the government and the people of the United States of America. I thank you for your kind attention. Sorry for my cold. My voice is not the best, because you always like to hear your own voice. My voice that I'm hearing today is not the voice that I would have liked to hear. I'm sorry about that.